On the night Lagos expected Damian Afolabi to choose a beauty queen, he walked past every rich woman in the ballroom and stopped in front of a quiet village midwife in worn sandals. The cameras laughed, the politicians whispered, the socialites stared in disbelief. Then the woman lifted her eyes, looked straight at him, and said 6 words that turned the room to ice. "Your mother did not die innocent." In that moment, the richest bachelor in the country knew the woman everyone had ignored was carrying a secret powerful enough to shake Lagos, ruin an empire, and expose the blood that had been smiling beside him for years. The grand sapphire hall glittered like royalty. Crystal chandeliers spilled gold across marble floors. Strings hummed near the stage. The daughters of governors, billionaires, retired generals, and celebrities sat wrapped in silk, diamonds, and expectation. Every major station in Nigeria carried the event live. Social media had already named it the choice of the century. Damian Afolabi, the country's youngest transport and energy billionaire, had promised that before midnight he would reveal the woman he intended to marry. Everyone expected spectacle. No one expected truth. They thought he would choose the senator's daughter with the perfect smile, the actress with millions of followers, or the heiress gossip blogs had already crowned future Mrs. Afolabi. No one noticed the woman standing near the service doors in a plain cocoa-brown dress, dusty from travel, holding a weathered medical bag and trying not to be seen. Her name was Amara. She had not come for the event. One of the hotel cleaners had gone into early labor upstairs, and Amara, a village midwife known for calm hands and steady courage, had come with the woman's cousin to help. After stabilizing the mother and arranging transport to a clinic, she had been told to wait near the ballroom until a ride could take her home. So she stood there, tired and out of place among perfume, cameras, and polished ambition. Then Damian stepped onto the stage. He wore a black tuxedo sharp enough to cut silence. His face was composed, but his eyes looked like a man measuring danger. The host lifted his hand and smiled toward the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, Mr. Damian Afolabi will make a decision the nation has been waiting for." Applause thundered. Damian took the microphone. "I know what people expect from tonight," he said, his voice low and steady. "They expect me to choose beauty, status, comfort, and the kind of name that looks expensive beside my own." A soft wave of laughter moved through the room. Then he said, "But a man who has nearly died learns to value different things." The laughter died instantly. Damian stepped off the stage. Cameras chased him. He passed the actress in silver, the governor's daughter in emerald, the lawyer, the beauty queen, the heiress, the women already wearing victory on their faces. He walked past every one of them without slowing down. The room turned restless. Then he kept walking, beyond the front rows, beyond the flowers, beyond the press, all the way to the service door, where Amara stood frozen beside a waiter. She looked behind her once, certain he meant someone else. But Damian stopped in front of her and held her gaze. The ballroom erupted. "This is a joke! Who is she? Has he gone mad?" Cameras flashed wildly. Damian reached into his pocket and brought out a small silver ring box. Gasps rippled across the hall. He opened it, but before he could kneel, Amara leaned slightly closer and whispered the sentence that emptied the air from his lungs. "Your mother did not die innocent." For the first time that night, Damian's face cracked. "How do you know my mother?" he asked under his breath. Amara swallowed. "Because before she died, she came to my village. And before she left, she put your future in my hands." The hall had gone so quiet, even breathing sounded loud. Damian stared at her, then lowered himself onto one knee before the whole country. "Amara," he said, loud enough for every camera and every enemy to hear. "Will you marry me?" Some laughed from shock, others covered their mouths, a few whispered, "Not her." But Damian remained there, one knee on polished marble, eyes fixed on the woman in worn sandals. Amara looked at him with fear, confusion, and recognition older than either of them. She understood what the room did not. This was not only a proposal, it was a line drawn in public. 5 years earlier, a storm had swallowed the road to Umuowa. Amara was returning from a difficult delivery in a neighboring village when she saw the wrecked black SUV half buried in mud. Rainwater ran red around the tires. Most people would have kept moving. Fake accidents often led to ambushes. But Amara was not most people. She dropped her bicycle and ran to the vehicle. A man hung half-conscious behind the wheel, bleeding, breathing shallowly. She forced her way through the broken rear window, found a weak pulse, and spoke to him the way she spoke to frightened mothers in labor. "Stay here. Do not leave me. If breath is still in you, then your story is not finished." With help from a passing cassava truck, she dragged him out and took him not to the unsafe government clinic, but to an abandoned maternity outpost at the edge of Umuowa, where she still kept basic supplies. By dawn, the stranger was alive. His ribs were bruised, his shoulder was dislocated, his head wound was ugly, but survivable. What troubled Amara more was what she noticed after sunrise when she checked the mud-caked vehicle. She was no mechanic, but even she could see the brake assembly had been cut cleanly. This had not been an accident. Before noon, 2 black vehicles rolled into the village. Men in dark glasses showed people a photograph and asked if they had seen an injured man. One flashed an Afolabi Group security badge. Another quietly offered cash for help bringing Mr. Afolabi home. Amara told them she had seen nothing. That night, the stranger woke. "Where am I?" he asked. "Umuowa." "How long?" "Since the storm." For 2 days he revealed almost nothing. No full name, no history. But everything about him betrayed wealth and control. On the 3rd morning, Amara returned from the market and found him studying a dusty bronze plaque on the wall of the outpost. "Donated in honor of women who bring life into the world. Grace Afolabi Foundation." He touched the name gently. "She was my mother." Amara went still. 2 years before her death, Grace Afolabi had come to Umuowa without convoy, without cameras, dressed like an ordinary donor. But she had stayed too long and asked too many dangerous questions about birth records, land maps, vanished signatures, and names missing from village documents after an oil transport corridor had been built. On her last night there, Grace had called Amara aside and placed a sealed cloth pouch in her hands. "If anything happens to me," Grace had said, "keep this hidden. And if my son ever reaches this place, not by invitation, but by danger, give it only to him." Amara had asked why. Grace's eyes had filled with old sorrow. "Because powerful men underestimate women who save lives. They think a midwife hears pain, but not secrets." A month later, Lagos announced Grace Afolabi had died in a car crash. Now her son stood in that same outpost, alive when someone had clearly tried to make sure he was not. Amara removed the hidden pouch from an old cabinet and placed it in Damian's hands. Inside was a brass key and a folded letter. The first line drained the color from his face. Damian, if you are reading this, then someone inside our family has already tried to take your life. Grace wrote that she had uncovered forged land transfers tied to logistics routes that later became pillars of Afolabi expansion. Villages had been pressured, bribed, or erased from the paperwork. She warned that someone on the family council had buried the truth and would move against Damian if he refused to surrender control. The brass key, she said, opened a records room beneath an abandoned maternity center funded in her name in Lagos. Before Damian could speak, headlights cut across the road outside. "They found you," Amara whispered. This time there were more vehicles. Amara pulled him toward the old delivery room, lifted warped floorboards, shoved the letter and key back into his hand, and pointed to the crawlspace beneath. "Do not speak unless the roof is on fire." "And you?" "I was born here," she said. "Let them try to frighten me in my own dust." The men searched the outpost with growing impatience. One moved toward the loose boards, but before he could reach them, a pregnant village woman stumbled in, crying in labor. Her mother and neighbors flooded in after her. The room turned to chaos. Amara shouted for towels, hot water, space. The armed men backed away in disgust as contractions intensified. By the time the baby cried, the vehicles were gone. When Damian climbed out, he found Amara washing blood from her hands. "You saved 2 lives tonight," he said. She did not look up. "Saving lives is ordinary work. It only feels miraculous because evil is loud." The words stayed with him. Over the next 4 days, Damian recovered in Umuowa. He watched Amara move through the village with a calm authority money could not buy. Mothers trusted her. Children ran to her. Elders respected her. She wore no jewels except a thin copper bracelet. She did not perform kindness. She practiced it. And for the first time in years, Damian felt something more unsettling than fear. He felt peace. On the morning he left, he asked her, "If everything my mother wrote is true, how do I know who to trust?" Amara adjusted her medical bag. "Trust the person who gains nothing by telling you the truth." He looked at her for a long moment. "If I survive this, I'll come back for you." She gave him a tired half-smile. "Do not make promises with a wounded heart. It likes to sound brave." But he meant it. What he did not know was that from 2 hills away, a man with a camera lens photographed his departure and sent it to Lagos. The photo reached Chief Damian Afolabi before lunch. He studied it in silence. His nephew alive, a village woman beside him, and on the outpost wall, the words, "Grace Afolabi Foundation." Chief Bode had spent years turning grief into power. After Damian's parents died, he had stepped in as protector, company guide, public stabilizer. But men like Bode did not love order. They loved control. "Find the woman," he told the head of private security. "If she knows what Grace left behind, we are already late." Back in the present, the whole nation watched Damian kneeling before Amara. If she refused him publicly, those hunting him would strike harder. If she accepted him, she would walk into a war she had never asked for. But she also knew silence was no longer safety. So while cameras flashed and the elite held their breath, Amara said one word. "Yes." The room did not cheer. It recoiled. Then everything broke at once. Questions, outrage, mockery, applause from the confused, phones lifted, reporters shouting. But Damian rose, took her hand, and turned toward the room with a stare so cold the front row fell silent. "No one in this hall," he said, "will speak of her with contempt and remain in my presence." Within the hour, every station and blog in the country carried the same headline. Billionaire chooses unknown village midwife over elite brides. Damian did not take Amara to a hotel. He took her straight to the Afolabi estate. The mansion stood behind iron gates, old money, and surveillance. Staff lined the entrance in confusion. Some bowed, some stared. The polished floors reflected Amara's worn sandals too clearly. Portraits along the walls looked like people who had never held a crying woman through labor. At the top of the staircase stood Chief Bode, dressed in cream agbada, smiling with practiced warmth. "Damian," he said, arms open, "you are alive. God is merciful." Damian did not embrace him. Apparently. Bode's eyes flicked to Amara only once, but it was enough. Men who hide secrets recognize danger fast. "And this is?" "The woman I intend to marry," Damian said. The smile stayed. The warmth disappeared. That night, Amara was given a guest suite larger than the outpost in Umuowa. A maid delivered tea and whispered to another, "Maybe he wants Charity to wear a ring." Amara heard. She said nothing. Later, Damian found her by the untouched tray. "You can still leave," he said quietly, "before this house closes around you." Amara looked at him steadily. "If I leave now, the people who tried to kill you will think fear still works. And if you stay? Then they learn a village woman can stand still longer than they can lie." At midnight, Damian took the brass key, Amara, and the family's oldest legal advisor, Barrister Tunde Ikanem, to the abandoned Grace Afolabi Women's Center in Lagos. The place had been shut down after funding irregularities, but that phrase now felt like a curtain over rot. Dust covered the halls, posters peeled from the walls. Broken equipment sat abandoned in corners. The brass key opened a locked basement records room. Inside were ledgers, file cabinets, document tubes, and shelves no one had touched in years. Amara noticed it first. A wooden birthing stool near the back with blue thread tied beneath the seat. The same faded blue Grace had used on the cloth pouch. Hidden inside was a cassette recorder and another letter in Grace's handwriting. Damian pressed play. His mother's voice filled the room. "If you are hearing this, then either I failed to protect you, or the people I feared have moved too soon." She spoke of forged acquisition papers, coerced signatures from village heads, shell companies, hidden reimbursements, and a legal witness who had disappeared after threatening exposure. Then came the line that froze the room. "Beware the man who calls himself your second father. Some men feed orphans so they may inherit grateful silence." Barrister Tunde leaned against a cabinet as if the ground had shifted. Before they could search further, the lights died. Darkness swallowed the basement. Footsteps sounded above. Someone rattled the gate. Then a voice floated down the stairs. "Search the building. He won't leave empty-handed." "They knew," Damian said. "Someone from the estate informed them," Barrister Tunde whispered. Using a small mirror from her medical bag, Amara caught the reflection of estate security boots beneath the shelves. Not street men, house security. They escaped through a rear service corridor into a wet drainage alley. As they reached the car, Amara stopped. "That basement was not where she hid the final proof," she said. It was where she warned you. The next day, while Lagos mocked Amara's background and speculated wildly about why Damian had chosen her, Barrister Tunde dug through old donor archives and found a name Grace had circled years before. Sister Evelyn Okoro, the last nurse administrator of the Women's Center. Officially dead, unofficially missing. By evening, an elderly pharmacist in Yaba gave them a lead. Sister Evelyn had fled east with documents too dangerous to die beside, toward Umuowa. At dawn, Damian, Amara, Barrister Tunde, and one loyal driver named Musa headed back with no convoy. This time, the journey did not feel like escape. It felt like return. At the outpost, Amara went to the birth records cabinet, removed the bottom drawer, and found a hidden compartment containing a wax-sealed folder, a rusted key, and a photograph of Sister Evelyn. Written on the back were the words, "If they force open the files, the ledger is in the chapel wall." There was no chapel in the outpost, but there had once been one near an abandoned maternity mission 2 kilometers away. Villagers used to call it the Mother's Chapel. They reached the ruin before noon. Vines climbed the walls. The roof sagged. One terracotta wall still stood, built long ago by local women. Amara stared at it, then said softly, "Men searched for paper. Women hid memory in clay." She tapped across the tiles until one sounded hollow. Damian pried it loose. Behind it lay a cloth-wrapped cavity containing the ledger, signed land maps, witness affidavits, reimbursement slips, and a final envelope addressed to Damian. "My son, if this reaches you, then the women succeeded where institutions failed. Remember this when power tempts you to speak over the quiet." Barrister Tunde scanned the documents and went pale. The forged acquisition trail ran straight through shell firms later absorbed by Afolabi infrastructure. Signatures pointed back to proxies used by Chief Bode. One affidavit, signed by Sister Evelyn and witnessed by Grace, named him directly in a land seizure cover-up that displaced river communities and laundered compensation funds through maternal grants. Lagos would not survive this quietly. Then a branch snapped outside. 2 vehicles had stopped below the chapel. Bode had found them. Damian slid the ledger into Amara's bag. "Take the back path." She did not move. "Not without you. That ledger matters more than I do." Her eyes hardened. A midwife does not choose between lives when both can still breathe. The men rushed the chapel. Musa tackled the first one through the door. Barrister Tunde slammed another into a stone pew. A third grabbed Amara's bag strap, but she twisted, drove her elbow into his throat, and struck him with the chapel bell rope hard enough to send him backward. Outside, Chief Bode stood beside his car in spotless cream, watching like a man too refined to touch the dirt he paid for. "Damian," he called almost gently. "Bring me the documents, and I can still explain this as confusion." Damian stepped into view, chest heaving. "You stole from villages, buried it with blood, and tried to murder me." Bode sighed. "Your mother always made morality sound so expensive." "She died because she found you out." "No," Bode said coldly. "She died because she believed truth could survive inside decency." Sirens rose in the distance. Not police. Press. Musa smiled through a split lip. "I sent the location to 3 reporters when we found the ledger." For the first time, Bode's expression shifted. If this became public here, in front of a ruined maternal chapel and buried land records, the story would outrun private force. He signaled retreat. Back in Lagos, Events moved fast. Barrister Tunde filed for an emergency injunction against the family council and sent authenticated copies of the documents to investigators, national papers, and a television anchor Grace had once trusted. By midnight, the first leak broke. By sunrise, the city had split in two. Chief Baudet went on television first. He called the claims fabrications by opportunists manipulating Damian during a trauma-related breakdown. He did not name Amara, but he referred to outside influences from rural actors with no understanding of corporate governance. Amara watched in silence, then tightened her head wrap. "He is afraid." "How do you know?" Damian asked. "Because men who tell the truth do not spend so much energy insulting the person who carried it." Fear made the powerful reckless. That night, as Amara returned from helping a cook at the estate with labor pains, someone tried to push her down the rear staircase. She caught the rail and saved herself. The attacker vanished into the dark. On the landing below, Damian found a broken bead from her copper bracelet. "It was someone inside," he said. "No," Amara replied. "Worse. Someone who walks inside without trembling." Chief Baudet publicly condemned the attack and privately requested a family reconciliation meeting. Damian agreed. Not for peace, for witnesses. The meeting took place in the same grand sapphire hall where he had proposed. This time it held lawyers, board members, investigators, selected press, and enough security to make violence inconvenient. Baudet's counsel attacked chain of custody, rural storage conditions, and witness reliability. Then he smiled thinly. The board would also like clarification on why a woman with no formal stake in the Afolabi group is being treated as a principal party. Before Damian could answer, Amara stepped forward. "Because if women had not protected your records, your lies would still be wearing suits." The room froze. She spoke without polish, but with the steadiness of someone who had spent years standing beside pain. "You want to know why I am here? I am here because your roads cut through villages, and your papers erased people who still buried children beside those same roads. I am here because grants meant for mothers were used to hide theft from mothers. I am here because the man you call a guardian hunted truth through clinics, chapels, and birth rooms, believing poor women would not know the weight of evidence. He was wrong." No one interrupted. Barrister Tunde presented the ledger. Investigators confirmed the seals and archival consistency. Then the tape played. Grace's voice rolled through the hall. When she warned of the second father, whatever illusion remained died. But the final blow came through the side entrance. A wheelchair rolled in under escort. In it sat a silver-haired woman, fragile but alive. Sister Evelyn Okoro. The hall gasped as one body. Chief Baudet's face emptied. Sister Evelyn had survived years in hiding under church protection after an attempted poisoning. When she learned Damian had reopened the maternal records trail, she agreed to testify publicly at last. "I signed those affidavits with Grace Afolabi," she said. "I watched community compensation disappear. I watched clinic accounts used as smoke over theft. And when Grace threatened to expose the scheme, Chief Baudet came to the center himself and warned her." She turned toward him. "Grace told him compassion is the only reason power deserves to live." Tears burned in Damian's eyes. Baudet rose stiffly. "You cannot prove I ordered any death." Sister Evelyn nodded toward Musa, who stepped forward with one final file: a forensic review of the brake sabotage from Damian's crash, tied to maintenance orders approved through a security office reporting directly to Baudet's private account. It was enough. Investigators moved in. Chief Baudet did not fight. Men like him believe even handcuffs are temporary. But they clicked all the same. Outside, Lagos exploded. The proposal clip resurfaced beside the arrest footage. The same commentators who had mocked Amara now called her the quiet woman who broke an empire. Villagers from the displaced communities were finally heard. Women from rural clinics held up photographs of Grace and Sister Evelyn. Mothers told daughters that being underestimated was not always a curse. Sometimes it was camouflage. 3 weeks later, federal authorities froze key Afolabi subsidiaries pending restitution. Damian faced the nation in a simple navy suit. Beside him stood Amara, wearing clean ivory and the same copper bracelet, repaired. "My family's wealth cannot be called honor if part of it was built on buried voices," he said. "We will return what was stolen, compensate the communities erased by greed, reopen the maternal centers that were neglected, and place their records beyond private control." Then he turned toward Amara. "And if this truth reached me at all, it is because a woman the world trained itself not to notice refused to let silence become tradition." This time, the applause came from everywhere. Damian did not lock Amara inside luxury. He went with her back to Umuowa. Together they rebuilt the old outpost into a real maternal care center, with solar power, clean wards, an emergency vehicle, trained staff housing, and a protected records archive overseen by both law and community. He named it not after himself, but in honor of Grace, Evelyn, and the unnamed women whose labor powerful men had once treated like background noise. The center opened beneath bright village sun. Women came carrying babies. Elders came in starched wrappers. Children ran between chairs. Reporters expected charity photographs. What they captured instead was respect. Damian taking instructions from local builders. Amara correcting the placement of delivery lights. Musa carrying boxes beside teenage volunteers. Barrister Tunde laughing with women who once feared every legal paper on earth. The wedding did not happen in Lagos. It happened in Umuowa. Clay lamps lined the path from the new center to the restored chapel ruins, now turned into a memorial garden for the women whose hidden records had saved the truth. Politicians sat beside farmers. Executives sat beside midwives. Cameras were allowed, but status bought no special seat. When Amara appeared, she wore no diamonds. Just a simple ivory gown with hand-stitched patterns inspired by birth symbols from her district. And on her wrist, the repaired copper bracelet that had nearly broken the night someone tried to push her into silence. Damian watched her walk toward him, as if wealth had finally learned what beauty was for. At the altar, he took her hands and whispered, "You saved my life. Twice." Amara tilted her head. "Only twice?" He laughed, and the laughter broke the last of his armor. Then, just before the vows, a cry rose from the back rows. A young pregnant woman had gone into sudden labor. Guests panicked. Amara did not. She smiled, handed her bouquet to a little girl, lifted the edge of her gown, and walked calmly toward the mother. Damian went with her. Under a side tent, while the choir hummed and the guests prayed, the bride guided a child safely into the world. The groom held the lantern. Musa fetched hot water. Elder women gave instructions with the authority of generations. When the baby cried, half the wedding cried with it. An old grandmother laughed through tears. "Now this," she said, "is a marriage blessed properly." An hour later, with a newborn resting against his mother's chest and joy hanging thick in the air, Damian and Amara returned to the altar. The sun had dipped low. The lamps were glowing. When asked why he chose her, Damian did not mention fate, mystery, or sacrifice. He said, "Because in a world full of people who wanted my name, she was the first person who cared whether I deserved it." When asked what he promised, he said, "To never use power to speak over the truth again." When Amara was asked the same, she smiled gently. To remind him when he forgets. Warm laughter rose through the village. Years later, people would tell the story in many ways. Some would say a billionaire shocked the nation by choosing a village midwife over beauty queens. Others would say a quiet woman exposed a rich family's darkest secret. But in Umuowa, the elders told it more simply. A dying mother hid truth among women, and truth waited there until the right son learned how to kneel. If this story moved you, if you believe character is louder than status, and if you know the world still underestimates quiet people, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, if you were in Damian's place, would you choose beauty, power, or the person who tells you the truth when it costs them everything?